Welcome to this week's Culture Report. We got some things to get into, from the death of another female soldier at Fort Hood to indigenous groups advocating for the renaming of Mount Evans. And actress Gisela Adisa joins us to talk about the multicultural interpretation of the stage play 1776. But first, Alexia and Laura asked some MSU students about the pressure women feel to have kids. So what was their responses? What did y'all hear?
We heard a lot of different things. Some people want kids, some people don't. It just really depends on the person and how they grew up.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of them do feel the pressure to have kids, but my sense in it was more like people want to feel like financially stable.
Right.
But it was definitely interesting to hear their different perspectives. So we actually have some interviews, so let's take a look.
Ooh.
Personally, I do feel pressured to have kids. Don't come from like the same society. I come from like a non-Western culture, so I was already supposed to have kids by now, but I have multiple jobs and just bought a house, so that financial struggle is already something, and I don't want to have that burden on my kids, so I want to be a lot more financially stable before I have kids. So 4 years ago I wanted to have kids, and now I don't know if I want to have them. So yeah, it's definitely different nowadays.
But I do want kids. I want lots and lots of babies. Not now, though. Not now. But I feel like since I did grow up traditional, it was like you have to like have them before you're like 30. And so I just feel like, I don't know, one of my main goals in life is having a family. So I do want that one day, just not right now.
I think that the United States is not it's not amenable to having children here. We're not a very supportive society towards kids, women. Like our infrastructure is not designed for it. There's no paid parental leave. It's not an easy place to have children. I'd like to have kids someday, but it's incredibly expensive, and it's not easy. It's like 3 jobs. So everybody I know that does it, I definitely support them for sure.
Expensive it is, guys.
Yeah.
We're not even talking like childcare, and then it's just starting with like having that pay to actually be able to leave and be with your kid when they're born. I know, I have a child, and that was a long time ago, and I had a lot of support, and even then it was hard. But like now, nationally, only like 20% of people have actually access to it. So I can't even imagine, like at this point, with how expensive things are, having to take 12 weeks off unpaid. I mean, how do you do that?
When you said you had support, did you mean like from your family, or was this from your job?
Family. But at that time, because here in Colorado, some companies will give you compensation, but there's a lot of caveats. Like you have to have a certain amount of time that you're working there, and you only get like a percentage. So nationally, like I said, only like 20% have access to it. And something that surprises me with that is that we're like the only developed country that doesn't offer that pay. Like, I don't know. I agree with the last person that we interviewed in the sense that it seems like we're not very supportive to people wanting, to want to have children.
And childcare is so expensive, so like they don't make it easy for people to have children because of the expenses that follow that. But
yeah, it's pricey. Do you want to have kids, Alexa? Like,
No, I've never wanted to have kids, but I feel like, especially now in this society, like, yesterday here in Denver, we had the East High school shooting. Like, why do I want to send my kid to school when there's things like that? That's like terrifying, to have a child in these kind of conditions. And I don't know, just how expensive it is, like you mentioned as well. That's also another point. I'm like, I don't think.
But I think, at least here in Colorado, something that makes me really happy is I know they're taking steps in the matter. In 2024, there will be maternity leave and family pay leave, which is something that, I would think is already in place. But, I'm just happy that Colorado's taking that extra step. So even, men that want to take care of a family member that's sick, you'll be able to have that. But
So up until now, like when a woman gets pregnant and has a baby and takes time off of work, what does that look like to take time off?
So it just means here in the States, you have protected leave. So meaning your job will be protected for those 12 weeks, but it's unpaid. So a lot of people can't afford it.
Right.
So that's, I think, one of the big things that surprises me, you know, how do you do that? How do you make that? So you're trying to get back to work quickly. I think like the most vulnerable time to be with your kid, you're missing out on it because you're just, you know, you're so worried about the money. So
Yeah.
And kids aren't cheap at all.
Something's got to change. Yeah. And something else that we noticed too that is happening nationwide in Colorado as well is birth rates and fertility rates are, you know, are lowering down too, which I mean, it's now surprising with, you know, people wanting to be more financially stable to be able to have them. I'm guessing the older you get, that's when you want to have them now.
Right, yeah.
So those are my thoughts in it. But yeah, we also have another issue going on too, coming up with the abortion pill that, you know, one judge is going to make a decision in Texas, which could limit abortion even further. Last week, he heard arguments about whether the FDA's approval of mifepristone should be allowed. The judge could order the FDA to temporarily withdraw its authorization of the drug, effectively banning medication abortions nationwide.
That's really, yeah, that's actually like really scary because they're saying like, oh, well, if you don't want kids now, like just don't have sex. And I feel like that's unrealistic. It's really odd, especially when you don't know the situation they may have been in.
Yeah.
So like forcing someone to go through that.
Like a forced
It's
pregnancy.
odd. And the fact that a man has this decision over women's bodies really rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, and
We're up to 12 states being overturned, correct?
yeah, so that's just, it's so scary. I just don't think, like, you know, Jamal said, a man making that decision for a woman, forcing them to have kids, especially when it's so hard to, you know, take care of them right now, is just, I don't think it should be a decision for them to make. And if that's the case, I mean, why not force men to, you know, be on birth control when that becomes available? Have a vasectomy. I mean, you know, if we're going to force them to do it.
Women are like, there's so many complications that women can have when they're pregnant, and birth control also has the same risks as, you know, being pregnant. So I don't understand why men don't have the same, why men don't do the same thing. you know?
Yeah. When I was in high school, my mom had to go through a procedure because she has lupus. And her lupus was really severe at the time, and she was pregnant, and she couldn't like carry the baby to term. So like I often think about like had that been in like 2022 or 2023, like what decision would she have to make, or like would that have cost her life? So it's kind of scary to think about.
And when you think about it, I mean, where does the woman fall in this place?
Right.
Like, you know, are they, you know, going to force you and maybe you're going to die because, you know, you're forced to have this child? I just think that should be a decision made between you and your doctor and not politicians making that for you. But
The death of another female soldier at Fort Hood is raising questions about sexual harassment in the military. On Monday, Private Second Class Ana Basaldua Ruiz was found dead. Her death comes 3 years after the murder of another Fort Hood soldier, 20-year-old Vanessa Guillen, who reported being sexually harassed before being killed. Fort Hood officials have not yet revealed the cause of death, but say they suspect no foul play. Leaders from the League of United Latin American Citizens, or LULAC, have said the soldier's parents stated that the daughter said she was being sexually harassed at Fort Hood. This is a conversation that kind of hit near and dear because I was in the military, and I have a family that is still currently in the military, and women in the military, it's very much the culture for sexual harassment in the military. I've seen it, I've heard it. It's very much a boys' club, and I was talking to someone I'm really close with that's still in the Army, and who had to go through a similar situation, and she was telling me about the reporting process. And it discourages a lot of women reporting like sexual assaults in the military.
how come?
Because there's a different legal system in the military. It's called the UCMJ. And under that military code of justice, you have to report this to your superiors. But if it's your superiors who are sexually harassing you, or you've had that incident with, then it becomes really hard for the women to report that. And then you have to go through other channels to make sure that if you're reporting that and you don't want to be stationed there no more, you have to publicize it in the military. So there's just so much.
What is if someone wanted to report it, let's say their superior was, harassing them, and they wanted to go over their head, what would that look like, the chain of command, if they can't talk to them?
I think it just depends, because a lot of times I know, when you report something like that, they always ask you, did you go through your chain of command, meaning did you talk to the person that you were supposed to talk to next, instead of skipping ahead. And a lot of times that could be frowned upon, or retaliation is a huge thing. And it just discourages women from coming forward. And it's not a good culture. Yeah.
And I feel like this space has had, already, like you said, Guillen, some history
Yeah.
of issues happening there. So when you say that, I can't imagine her telling her family constantly, something's going on, I'm being sexually harassed, and then, getting that notification that your child, or they claim, committed suicide. I don't know, something just doesn't fit right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not enough resources. The person I was talking to yesterday and talking about her experience in the military, her sister's actually thinking about going into the Air Force, and she said that broke her heart when she told her, because she's like, I would never recommend for women to join the military because of this, because like the women are not protected. And having to go through her experience, like she had to, when she reported it, they had to do character statements on her, even though she was the one that reported the sexual assault, that they came and interviewed her coworkers to make sure she was a credible person, which was kind of also discouraging.
When you were in the military, did you see any of this firsthand?
I did. I saw it a lot, and I heard it a lot. And it was a little different for me, like being a gay man, but I've also had like an experience with it. And at the time, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was still into place. So like you couldn't vocalize that you were gay because that was against like the laws in the military.
Right.
So like reporting something like that, in my mind, I was like, what do I say? Like, how's this going to affect me or that person? And so it's a very convoluted system, and it just doesn't support women like it should be. And it's just like, this shouldn't have happened. And for this to happen at the same base, well, we don't know all the details yet,
Right.
but it's eerily similar to Vanessa Guillen. And for this to happen again, it's just very suspect.
Yeah.
I'm glad these organizations are around to keep them and hold them accountable.
Yeah, because that's you think some changes they would start making changes, especially after that, to see it
Yeah.
happen again. I don't know.
I know, like, after Vanessa Guillen happened, her family advocated for years to get legislation passed.
Right.
And in 2021, the Vanessa Guillen Act was passed, making it illegal for the process to be held just in the chain of command. So it has to go outside of that, which it should. Like, if you're reporting sexual assault and then the people you report it to are the ones that investigate, it's probably a little off.
On last week's episode, we talked about the Oscars, but there was one moment in the show we didn't mention that should have been talked about. At the awards show, An Irish Goodbye won Best Live Action Short. James Martin, who is the first person with Down syndrome to win an Oscar, and his cast went up to accept the award. When it was time for the cast to give a speech, they mentioned that it was James' birthday, and they had the crowd sing to him. James did not have the opportunity to speak at all during the big moment. This caused some mixed reactions from viewers. Malik Gooch with the Colorado Cross Disabilities Coalition explains why this moment was actually negative.
There's also the subject of infantilization. And with infantilization, it is the treatment of a person as a child due to either certain behaviors or disabilities. And that's just unfair to Mr. James Martin, because he should have had the opportunity to give a speech if he wanted to, or allow the crowd to know that it was his birthday. Now, is this necessarily a malicious act on his cohort's part? No, sometimes infantilization is done completely by accident, and sometimes it's just seen as a good gesture by the individual who performed it. But I can understand why there is much controversy, especially due to the fact that this was such a monumentous occasion and Mr. James Martin didn't get to speak himself.
Malik said a way that would have been more inclusive would have been if the cast came up with the plan beforehand, or would have let James give a speech and then let the crowd know that it was his birthday. Since the award show, James has only said good things about receiving the award and said he's returning to his job at Starbucks as well.
One of Colorado's most popular 14ers will keep its current name, at least for now. The U.S. Geographical Names Board was set to vote to change the name from Mount Evans to Mount Blue Sky last week, but the decision was delayed after receiving a request from a tribal government who says the term Blue Sky is a part of a sacred ceremony. Mount Evans is currently named for John Evans, Colorado's territorial governor during the Sand Creek Massacre in 1864. One of the peace chiefs for the tribe says any name change is a long time coming.
And it's a beginning of many names to be changed, many mountains to be changed, many historic places to be changed, many cultural landscapes to be changed, because that's our lands.
It's a reimagining of a Broadway classic. 1776 is on tour across the U.S. right now. It's the story of an integral part of our nation's history, but this time around, it's being told by a cast composed of mostly women, people of color, as well as trans and non-binary individuals, groups whose stories are far too often erased from history. I had the chance to chat with Gisela Adisa. She plays John Adams in the national tour. We had an enlightening conversation about her journey and diversity on stage. Take a look. But first, I would love to just take it from the beginning. I just want to know, when you were younger and had aspirations to be on Broadway, I just want to know who you had to look up to that looked like you.
You know, it's funny, when I was younger, I never thought or envisioned myself being on Broadway per se, because that just seems so far away and inaccessible to my little mind. Mm-hmm. I felt more likely to, one day I'm going to be on the Muppet Show, like, which is bizarre and unreal, but that's what I saw in my living room every day. That's what I had access to every week when I was a little kid. It wasn't until I got a little older and realized this is really something I want to make my life's vocation. If I'm lucky enough to do it, I want to be like Melba Moore. I want to be like Stephanie Mills. I want to be like Audra McDonald. I want to be like Heather Headley. And it was seeing those beautiful Black women excelling and playing amazing, well fleshed out characters who also happen to be amazing singers or dancers. That was the inspiration for me. Yeah.
I know diversity on stage has been discussed for, decades. It's not a new topic. It's not a new conversation, but I will say it got thrust into the mainstream in the Hamilton era, or the post-Hamilton era. Like, once they found out that diversity was profitable. I'm just curious if, like, from being within the industry, if you noticed that shift from before and after, like, were you getting more, like, were more roles presented for you, or did things feel more attainable when that happened?
Yes, and I think anyone watching right now with aspirations in any career that is connected to success, our idea of the pursuit of happiness, which is connected to capitalism, anybody in any field can appreciate, like, okay, it was hard for me to get in where I fit in, but now that there's this zeitgeist and this trend, I feel like I'm welcome, but it almost sometimes feels hollow. Mm-hmm. So there's that dichotomy, there's that duality of, do I take advantage of this opportunity and show them, like, how it's about time? And yes, congratulations, you've decided to be diverse, but this is also your realization that you should have hired us in the first place.
Why do you believe that it's so important that we embrace colorblind and genderblind casting for roles that they're appropriate for?
Yes, we are definitely gender blind cast. We are a cast of women, of non-binary people, of trans people, basically people who do not identify as male. And the fact that the show is being called colorblind cast, I'm not sure I agree with that 100%. I do believe that specific people were chosen for specific roles. Okay. So it's colorblind in that it's not necessarily a white person in the role of this historically white figure. Right. But there is a significance to having John Adams be played by a Black woman. It would be a different significance, equally important, but different, if it was an Indigenous person or an AAPI person, an Asian person. It takes on different colors because it takes on the experience and the perspective of that individual. And it's freaking magical, and it's radical. And the reason why I think it's important is because there is resistance. I don't want to preach to the converted. I mean, I want you to come to the show again, Jamal, and bring your friends, but I also want people to bring their friends that maybe had a problem with Hamilton, or maybe had a problem with Ariel not being Caucasian. And I want them to see the show, feel their resistance, work through the thicket of that, look at themselves and say, why do I feel that way? Why can't I just enjoy the story being told by these storytellers and realize maybe they're showing me something that I wouldn't have seen if this piece, this revival, was traditionally cast.
Right. You can catch 1776 at the Buell Theater through April 2nd. Just head over to denvercenter.org for tickets.
So each and every week we want to end the conversation on the good news, the good that's happening in and around our culture. Colorado Department of Education honors the first black man, Jimmy Lee Day II for Teacher of the Year. Day, who is the band director and musical teacher at East Middle School in Aurora, has rebuilt 3 award-winning bands, so maybe he can help Deion Sanders with his band, the CU, like we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. But nonetheless, it's an important recognition of black excellence here in Colorado.
All right, and many tribes consider buffalo sacred, but they were disposed of their herds hundreds of years ago. On Wednesday, 35 bison that began their journeys in Genesee, Colorado, were returned to indigenous lands. The bison were presented to tribal nations as part of a ceremony that included a drum and a travel blessing.
All right, the cast of Ted Lasso visited the White House to talk about the importance of mental health to promote overall well-being. It talked about the importance of going to therapy and checking in on loved ones. During the visit, Jason Sudeikis said, while it's easier said than done, we also have to know that we shouldn't be afraid to ask for help ourselves.
And the Maryland Senate just passed the Trans Health Equality Act. The legislation expands Maryland's Medicaid program to cover transition-related treatments like laser hair removal and voice therapy. Life-saving medication like hormone replacement therapy is already included in its state Medicare plan. But this bill increases coverage for those gender-confirming surgeries, so it's awesome. All right, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Culture Report. We'll be back next Thursday to continue the conversation right here on our free 9 News Plus app and 9news.com. Thank you for joining us.